Okay, I'm going to show you how to make buttonholes using the automatic buttonhole foot. So this part opens and this is where you put your button. Now you can put a pretty large button here, as you can see, but I'm going to just use this one here. This is the one I've chosen for this particular project. Now you always want to use a scrap of fabric of the same kind that you're using for your garment and make a test buttonhole. If you're using interfacing, make sure there's interfacing in there. Never just do a buttonhole with 2 layers of thin fabric. It's not enough to support the buttonhole. Now, I have seen nice shirts made with 3 layers of fabric like this along the front placket. So that's what I'm going to do. Then I mark the beginning of the buttonhole and the center line. This about like that. And there's the beginning line. It's going to form this way, starting here and come around that way. But I always try to make sure that my marks are going to be covered up by the stitches of the buttonhole. Okay, we want to take off the foot, put the buttonhole foot on like this. If you need to, you can lift up your presser foot a little higher like that, and then just snap that right on. Now the top thread needs to go through there, but there's no slit on the side. So I'm going to show you an easy way. We take a single stitch, lift up the presser foot, and that single stitch pulls the thread tails through like that. Keep your thread tails off to the right. There's this little dip in the plastic right here. That's what you want to line up this line with. You can lift up your presser foot a little higher to make sure that your fabric gets under there evenly. There are little grippers on the bottom of your presser foot. So we want to line that up just right. And then the short line here, the one that goes across, we want to have that about 1 millimeter ahead of where the plastic starts. You want to make sure that the edge of your fabric is parallel with the edge of your presser foot. Once you have the foot on, it's time to select your stitch and your stitch length. So we go up here to buttonhole right here, our stitch length down to buttonhole right there. Then we pull down the buttonhole lever and it's located right behind the needle threader like that. Make sure it's all the way down and behind this little piece of plastic there. Notice that it has a buttonhole symbol on it. Remember, you'll need to see 3 buttonhole symbols, 1 on the buttonhole lever, 1 on the stitch selector, and 1 on the stitch length. All 3 of them. Now we're ready to go. When you first start, make sure that you hang onto those thread tails for the first couple of stitches. Starts out by making a bar tack, and then stitches in reverse. Bar tack and stitching forward. Now slow down, because when you get to that bar tack, it doesn't automatically stop. So when you make a stitch or 2 into the bar tack, you're done with your buttonhole. Now as soon as I've done a buttonhole, I want to go right over here to this little arrow. Hear that noise? That's to make sure that we have the machine reset to begin the next buttonhole. That's important. Now before I cut the threads, I cut off the thread tails from the beginning so that they are out of the way, because the ending thread tails will need to be tied. So I want to test the length of the buttonhole to make sure it's the right length with the button that I have. I'll take that button out. We're going to cut our buttonhole, and the safest way I've found to do it is take a pin, put it just inside the bar tack like that, to protect that bar tack. So when you go to cut your buttonhole, you won't accidentally cut right through. I don't cut right up to the bar tack because I don't want to dull my seam ripper on that pin. So I turn it around, there I started it, and then I start from this end and pull through. Something I want to say about seam rippers is if you have to push it really hard, that means your seam ripper is starting to get dull. It's time to get a new seam ripper. Now this one works great because it's a fairly new seam ripper. I want to take that button, put it through there. It's a little on the loose side. So to make it tighter, what I would do is take the buttonhole foot off of my machine. I'm going to put the button in there And I'm going to listen for those clicks. That's this little piece of plastic here that it clicks along. I'm going to click it back a couple just to get the button out. Click it forward a couple, maybe a little bit tighter. Then I make another sample buttonhole, and that way I can tell whether or not it's tight enough. Here's my example. This was the first buttonhole I made. It was a little bit loose. The button might come unbuttoned by itself, but I tightened it up a little bit more. So you can sew without the button there, and it is just nice and snug. It's not going to come loose, but it comes through the buttonhole just fine. So that's a way to adjust your length of your buttonhole if you need to. And of course, if you need to make it longer, you can just leave the button in there and then just scoot it out just a little bit more. Again, making another sample buttonhole before you actually sew the buttonholes on your garment. Okay, to finish the buttonhole, now notice I've already cut it, but there's a lot of these extra threads and stuff in here. I want to make sure and get that cleaned up. Fold the buttonhole in half, trim those out. And if there are any threads that come across from one end of the buttonhole to the other, we don't want the button to get caught in those. We can make sure and trim those off as well. Now the thread tails, what do we do with those? Okay, so this is the front. The back is here. I'm going to pull that bottom thread tail. If you look really carefully, you can see a loop of thread coming through. So I hang onto that and pull it through and see the thread tails coming through. Those thread tails need to be tied in a knot in order to keep them from coming unsewed. So I'm going to go like this, a nice little square knot. Now, what do we do with these thread tails? Because we don't want to cut them too close to the fabric, because that could also make them come undone. So I'm going to go between the layers with my big darning needle like this. Take my thread tails, thread them through the big eye of the needle. By the way, these big needles are great. And then pull it right through. And now that's nice and neat and finished. I'm going to cut off that extra thread about a ½ inch away, but it's between the layers, and so we won't see it. And of course, you're going to want to use thread that matches your fabric. I did this in a contrast thread so you could see what I'm doing. So that's how to use your automatic buttonhole foot. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give us a thumbs up. And if you have comments, questions, or ideas for other videos, let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Bye.